All right, guys, what we got here is Canada and Sweden, and they're talking about speaking on with Deputy Ebba Busch of Sweden about the strategic partnership. Here it is.
Thank you all. Really welcome to Ottawa, welcome to Canada. I'm really, really happy to see all of you. Ça me fait plaisir de vous voir ici dans la capitale nationale. Ça me fait plaisir également de revoir mon ami, Ebba Busch. And of course, Your Royalty, Your Excellencies, it's a pleasure to have you here. Of course, I met with some of you yesterday. And in the context of my speech, I was referring to the fact, like you've already mentioned, that we're living in a much more dangerous world, much more complex world. And in that context, we've seen over the last years not only the increased trade tensions, but it was linked to the deterioration of the international security architecture. And I used to work as Canada's foreign minister on the diplomatic front of these trade tensions. Now I'm working much more on the economic front of it. And I used to work a lot on the relationship between Canada and Sweden, because Canada was very much a pivotal member at NATO to first recognize Sweden as being part of NATO, so being the first country to ratify Sweden's accession to NATO, but second, also working in the background, along with Jens Stoltenberg, to really make sure that we would have Turkey's support to NATO in order for Sweden to ultimately join NATO. And secondly, we worked a lot together on a new Arctic foreign policy for Canada, recognizing that as Arctic countries, now both part of NATO, we could be stronger together in order to deal with the threats of Russia and China in the Arctic. And now, since I'm the new industry minister, my second foreign trip after the Paris Air Show was actually to go to Sweden, because I really thought that we could be stronger together as we were dealing, concretely speaking, with the real trade tensions and the overexposure of Canada towards its neighbor on the economic front. And a lot of good conversations happened during that trip, including with obviously Mr. Wallenberg that is here, but many of you also. And the goal is to further these conversations that we started back in August. And now, when you look at what Canada's vision and plan is our vision is to build Canada strong. We believe that there are lots of things we cannot control in the world right now, but there are a lot of things that we can control. And meanwhile, our plan is to protect, create, attract. Protect jobs that are affected by tariffs, create jobs, because we will have a new defense industrial strategy helping a lot the manufacturing sector, a lot the sectors in tech and AI. And also we have major projects, so investing in nuclear, investing in the clean grid, and I'll have the chance to talk about that as well. And of course attract talent and attract investments.
So
and we just announced that we would have one of the biggest budget in the world to attract 1,000 new researchers, while other countries are taking a toll against academic freedom and cutting science. We will double down on science, and we'll double down on research, and we'll attract the best and brightest in the world. So based on that plan, it's great to see that, concretely speaking, while Ebba and I will be working on the diplomatic and economic infrastructure at the state level, that there are great business people that are able to work together, to trust each other, to develop networks and build on the strong foundation. But we could do even more together as a country, as a business community. So I really hope that I can help you all to do business together, create jobs together. We need it, and we know that we can trust each other. So, au plaisir de travailler avec vous, et bonne journée aujourd'hui. Bon séjour à Ottawa.
Thank you very much. And I'm having the great pleasure of inviting Ebba Busch up on stage as well. She is the Swedish Minister for Energy, Business and Industry, and on top of that, Deputy Prime Minister. Please welcome to stage.
Thank you so much, Your Majesty, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Mélanie, friends of business, friends of Canada and Sweden. It is very good to be back, I must say. I had the honor of being here 2 years ago, and it's great to be back here for Canada-Sweden Innovation Days. And I don't know, I met a few of the business leaders in the room here yesterday, and I've turned this trip into somewhat of a geology lesson. I hope that's all right. And if you can tell, maybe that I'm also a minister responsible for natural resources and mining in Sweden. But the matter of the fact is that Canada and Sweden used to be joined together by the bedrock. We used to be siblings, separated by the Atlantic, but built from the same bedrock, quite literally. And long before the Atlantic Ocean separated us, we were joined as the Baltic and Canadian shields formed part of a supercontinent called Rodinia. And what I think is quite fascinating, if you look back at the word Rodinia, it stems from a word that translates into family. And I think that says something with strong symbolic value as well. Because now, almost a billion years later, those two countries that were separated by the Atlantic, Sweden and Canada, are not only symbols of shared values, but also means we share many industries, from forestry to steel, mining, and not least energy. So while our continents have drifted apart, our nations, I would say, are now closer than ever. Built on the same stable foundations and values, we now stand side by side. And I would like to once again extend my gratitude for your rapid ratification of Sweden's application to NATO. And we now are close partners when it comes to innovation and clean energy. And if you look at how we've managed to take our quite tough conditions and the tough landscapes from which we come from and turn that into prosperity and welfare for our citizens, it all comes down to our work ethics, our sense of knowing that both curiosity and working hard can make you overcome truly challenging times. And I think maybe we need much more of that now, more than ever. We might have come from poor conditions, so poor that 100 years ago, or a little bit over that, 1 million Swedes emigrated to America. Things have changed now. And despite coming from these tough conditions, we're now in a completely different ballpark. We now, although having a smaller population than the City of London, as I said yesterday, we managed to produce our own fighter jets. They're world class. Just putting it out there. We managed to produce great submarines and AVAX aircraft and launches satellites into space, some of them represented here today as well. And we do that not only because we're great as Swedes, but because we're picky with who we choose as partners. So it's not a coincidence that we're here in Canada. We believe in cooperation, and we don't manage to do all of this alone, but by partnering up. I have, for some weird reason, although I come from the political family of Konrad Adenauer, Robert Schuman, and Alcide de Gasperi, for some reason I have quoted Elvis Presley in many settings over the last few years. A little less conversation, a little more action, if you please. But yesterday on Canadian TV, I said that, and I don't know where I got this from, but I said that Sweden is now in Daft Punk mode. And what do I mean by that? We're ready to go harder, better, faster, stronger, and we'd like to do it with Canada. Thank you.
So while Ebba is getting mic'd up here. Very good. Now,
Are you in Daft mode?
Daft Punk mode?
Daft mode?
yes, always.
Maybe later tonight.
Whatever the Deputy Prime Minister says, I am in that mood.
See, that's why.
It's so good to have you here. May I start off by kind of an almost political existential question? The Canadian academic and writer Naomi Klein once wrote that politics hates a vacuum. It is, if it isn't filled with hope, someone will fill it with fear. And in these times, I think a lot of people actually feel that it is a bit difficult to have a positive perspective on the future. How can you work now, and how can we work together to fill that space with hope and void that is filled with fear?
Well, listen, I'm full of optimism today. I think, are we okay?
That was a bad combination here.
Yep, we're good? Okay. I think that Canada has gone through a lot in the past year. But I feel that there's a renewed sense of optimism because there's a feeling that, and I was referring to it in my remarks, that we can control things. That, well, indeed, there's a lot to be anxious about. There are things that we can take decisions on that will make our lives better and ultimately the future of our country and our kids and grandkids better. And today is just a good example. If you would have organized a delegation like this in the past 2-3 years, people would have been really, really happy to see you because, of course, we love Swedes and we have so much in common. You talked about the weather, you talked about hockey. But we took our friends for granted, you know? That's what we did. And we thought that the rules as they were developed would be followed and, you know, we would continue to do business. And bit by bit, geopolitics became more complicated. And, you know, oh, well, it's happening elsewhere. Elsewhere in Europe, in the Middle East. We're in North America. That's not the case. And we felt protected by our geography. And, you know, not everybody will tell you, but that was a bit the ethos of our nation. Until what happened with the trade tensions in, you know, basically the rhetoric in the past months. And I think that was a reckoning that we needed to, there's an expression where I come from in Canada, which is Quebec, which is a Francophone province. We call it maître chez nous, master of our own land. Being able to be in charge of things. And while there's a lot of protectionism going on, we can continue to do free trade. We can do so, obviously, with Sweden, and you know, we have a powerhouse here with us. That's you, Ebba. We, you know, with the European Union, Canada is the only G7 country having so many free trade agreements. Well, the only free trade, you know, the only country of the G7 having free trade agreements with every other G7 countries. So I think that we can just do things and not be scared of doing things. We can do business, be closer, create new networks, and this will have a huge impact in the next decades. But there's a rupture that happened over the past few months. And, you know, we're going ahead and we're basically going to do things differently. And we will build our country strong, and we will do so with friends, you know, and great relationships that are trustworthy, like Sweden.
And one step is that it's actually the signing of the strategic platform of collaboration ground that was signed yesterday by the Prime Ministers. And let me ask you, Ebba, how can we break that into kind of concrete actions? How do we go from the fancy words in the writing into what we actually do together?
Well, you could help us out in this room because it's not policymakers that create job opportunities and economic growth. We can set bad or good conditions for it, but ultimately it's you as business leaders, you're the ones that are the true job creators. And what we're trying to do here is pave way basically for you guys and to create better business opportunities for you already starting this week. And I think a few of you in the room have met quite a lot of politicians. And you know, and you can hear now, we're good at talking. And sometimes we sign papers that bear a huge symbolic value. The strategic partnership with Canada is such a paper, but not only. This can truly be translated into very concrete steps and actions. I think one of the guarantees for this is both the leadership of Prime Minister Carney himself, but not least you, Mélanie. And Mélanie has already established her in a Swedish context as a doer. And I would, just to give you a political read on the partnership, it is extremely comprehensive. It is very, very well worked through in the way that it also then guarantees concrete outcome from it. In the energy sector, when it comes to forestry, when it comes to security and defense, and speaking to your point of hope, I have a lot of existential conversations now with my 2 children back at home, my 8-year-old and not least my 10-year-old. And he was actually asking me 2 years ago, when things were truly turbulent in many areas at the same time, he asks me, "Mommy, how do we know that things will get better? How do we know if life will be okay?" was his exact question, translated into English. And that also sparked, you know, for me as a mother, but also as a policymaker, fear can drive a lot of change, but too much fear will only paralyze everything. And then there will be no driver for change whatsoever. But I think that Canada and Sweden are also 2 nations that shows this week, for example, with the COP going on in Brazil, it is possible to both cut emissions and drive economic growth up at the same time, if you do it right, if you also weigh in competitiveness and value for your own citizens. That is possible. But then that's a realistic hope. And that's the type of hope that I think that the collaboration between Canada and Sweden can also pave way for.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Getting long answers today.
Yes,
Yeah, that's it.
and to be
But
true,
that's
I'm
it.
not surprised. But having said that, then now you spoke about the air fighters and the jet fighters, and one of the cornerstones, one of the pillars in the strategic agreement is also defense and security. Now, what are the strategic advantages of actually collaborating in the field of security?
Well, you know, I think that because Sweden was not part of NATO for a long, long time, your neutrality was supported by a very strong military industrial complex, which in Canada, we really benefited a lot from the peace dividend, and we didn't invest enough in our armed forces for a long time. That's just a reality. Now, we said we would get to 2% and actually to 3.5%, 2% before the end of the year, and 3.5% and eventually 5%. To get to 3.5%, it's, you know, with the GDP of Canada, it's quite a lot. When you look at what is in the budget, that passed this week. So, yes. Congrats. That's good news. So, when you look at it, it's $81 billion over 5 years. So that's $16.5 billion per year for the next 5 years. Our national daycare program is actually $6 billion per year. So it's 3 times pretty much the national daycare program. That's a lot of money. Of course, a lot of it will be given to, we've just given a 20% pay raise to our military. We will be investing in our different bases. We want to increase our footprint across our land, particularly in the Arctic. But a lot of it will be also about creating jobs. And we think we can create thousands of jobs through that investment. And our goal will be to build in Canada, to own the IP. But there are things that we cannot build because we just don't have the capacity. And we want to be able to diversify our partners. And that's where Sweden comes in, because we can partner. If we can't build, we will partner. And partnering, we think that there can be great cooperations between, for example, Saab and Bombardier. And that's what you and I spoke about, and that's one of the reasons why I went to Sweden back in August. I think that there can be more work that is done also by, we have a great space sector, MDA, Telesat, Magellan, that could sell also to Sweden and do joint ventures that would be really, really helpful. So there's a lot of possibility, and I look forward to being able to see more of that. Of course, we're very much interested in the offer by SAB over the Gripen and the creation of jobs in Canada and working together regarding Ukraine. But we need to have more details about it because we need to be able to, do the work, the analysis of how much we could benefit out of it. But we'll continue the conversations for sure.
Digging into innovation, now how can we also leverage each other's innovation strengths in this field?
Yeah, and I'll combine those two questions and 3 points. First and foremost, Sweden we're doing our homework. We're now full-worthy NATO members, and mind you, we were one of the countries, even if you looked at non-members or full-worthy members, that participated in most NATO-led operations before we were NATO members. We're now doing our homework. So next year, with the budget that we have proposed for Parliament that will be voted on in December, we will reach 2.8% of our GDP for defense already next year, set to meet the 5% mark by 2030. We're doing our homework. The second part I'd like to point out is you'll meet some countries that sell their products by saying, and I'm not going to name any names, but we're the biggest, we're the best. And then you meet Sweden, and we say, we're smaller, but we're smarter. And I really mean that, because we're second in the world when it comes to innovation. And that also, you can also see that in our defense industry. So we have some truly high quality products. We know what we are selling, and we're trustworthy. If you make a deal with a Swede, then that will really, really last. The third and final remark is the proof is in the pudding, Look at Ukraine and what we've done there. And what our defense industry has done in Ukraine. We show that we can apply our technology for modern warfare. We're proving it today, this very day as we're speaking now in Ukraine. Do we have BAE in the room now, BAE Systems? Yeah, we do. Good to have you here. The way that they have worked with the Ukrainians fighting the fight for freedom and democracy and sovereignty of Europe on the front line shows that we can deliver fast adaptation for a defense industry that is hard to match for anyone else. And that is the way our innovative Swedish spirit also takes form in concrete action.
Thanks.
Great salesperson for Sweden.
Indeed.
The media are watching,
I'm taking notes and learning. I thought that was my job, but you're doing it really, really good. Now we have very short of time, but I feel it would be exactly. I would love to sit here with you another hour or two, but just very shortly, if you could reflect a little bit on the other kind of big theme here, the electrification, sustainability, climate change, before we need to wrap up.
Yeah, and it's a very important part of what we're doing because we've presented a new legislation, which is C5. It's about making sure that we can fast track major projects. And in that context, we've created a major projects office. We have a new president. The Prime Minister at this point has announced 11 different projects, and a lot of them are about electrification. Actually, the majority of them are linked to having a clean grid and being able to invest even more in harnessing Canada as a energy superpower. Now we're working also on nuclear. We have great can-dos to sell. To Sweden. We think that it's Canadian IP. We think that not only it's a Canadian supply chain, but also we're the second biggest producer of uranium in the world. So it's the entire supply chain, not only the manufacturing and energy sector, but also on the critical mineral side. And at the same time, we have lots of new energy projects, and we're such as wind, and we are looking for investors as well. So I think, you know, when I was saying attracting more foreign direct investment, attracting investment coming from Sweden would be great news. And I know that on our side, there are the Maple 8, there are great pension funds, and Brookfield, et cetera, are interested also investing in Sweden. So it's not only the job creation, the companies together, but also investors together. And that would make a lot of sense. As I know, Sweden is investing even more in particularly energy, but also nuclear in the coming weeks and months.
And we're very, very ready to take on more Canadian money and investments in Sweden. We're more than happy to take it on because we're actually set on a wonderful journey, but it will be very challenging to double, to be able to meet a doubling of demand when it comes to electricity in Sweden. It is stable and competitive prices that has built Swedish welfare and prosperity, and we are now set to double that system. It is almost 100% fossil-free. We have 0.6% comes from fossil sources. The rest is hydropower, nuclear, and wind power. We have also showed that we have moved away from the battle of the power sources. We now welcome all fossil-free power sources. But if we are to transition our heavy industry, I need power 24/7, 365 days a year. I need baseload. Baseload is the prettiest word I know, especially if it's fossil-free, because it means that my heavy industry, such as the defense industry, such as our steel producers, can actually do that green transition, not as a fantasy, but as an economically competitive reality. And this is why we're looking for investments in Sweden, in our grid system, AI, digitalization, battery and storage, of course, in the renewable sector, but also we just did a huge summit on Nordic-Baltic nuclear investment, because if you invest in Sweden, then that is a gateway to the whole Baltic Sea region, I would say, also when it comes to nuclear power. We're expecting our first new application for nuclear power plant by the end of this winter, and we'd love to take on yet another application, preferably would be for a large-scale conventional reactor, and we know that there are some good Canadian options for that. So,
All right, that was the Canadian-Sweden bolstering strategic partnership discussion, and there'll be more over the day, I'm sure. For now, we're going to let this go. Don't forget, if you have any comments about this particular subject, feel free to leave them in the chat. We'll see you later.